Hey there, welcome to episode 88 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. It is 3:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, July 16, 2025. Today's title and topic, layoffs. Layoffs, if you've ever been working somewhere and got the notice. I guess I don't work here anymore. That's the topic of today. I've only been laid off a couple times. We'll get to that. If you are new to the Quaggling Sand audio program, you may not know this. The technical term for what you probably call pins and needles, the return of circulation to maybe your hand or your foot or your leg or somewhere that has been slept upon. Perhaps you were sitting funny. I don't know what that really means, but the return of sensation, that tingling, sometimes annoying, sometimes troubling pins and needles is actually called Quaggling Sand, and that is today's that's what you'll be listening to today, the Quaggling Sand audio program. It's a audio program about stories, tales, happenstance. Really not so much room for guests, so there have not been. But maybe you'll take something from my telling or retelling. We'll find out. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes. The summary is in there, which I will read to you, and the links for today's episode, and I'll make a special comment about the links, which are as they were, but they will be changing. The summary of today's episode: I have been laid off a couple of times in my career, and I was thinking about it. I believe it really is too. Usually it is an opportunity. Lately, as I see this happening to others, it may not be. So the links, I will, again, these are the same as last week, but they will probably change. Buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo is my profile page. It's a text page. There's links and there's words and little emoji icons, Unicode characters actually. If you visit that page, you'll see a collection of links to audio program profile pages, probably on the creator.spotify.com website. I think that's the correct. And then they'll point to my individual programs that I host there, as in I publish the audio like this program, and you can subscribe to the RSS feeds and all the usual stuff for podcasting. Go there and you will see that Buy Me an Update and Coffee Solo now have Spotify feeds. I'll get into this. Well, I've actually gotten into this a little bit in the Coffee Solo episode from yesterday. But basically, Buy Me an Update and Coffee Solo, you can still find those hosted shows on those websites. So you can visit buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts, and you will see the Buy Me an Update audio program posted there. It's individual audio posts. They don't generate an RSS feed. And then if you go to ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/danhugo, the hyphen is the key next to the zero on most keyboards. So if you visit the ko-fi.com/danhugo/posts, you can get the Coffee Solo audio program, which has no schedule and no particular agenda, just whatever. But I ran into some trouble publishing Buy Me an Update on Monday, and Buy Me a Coffee support promises to get back to you in a few hours. Then their level of support was start by deleting your cookies and rebooting your computer and all this other silliness. So I said, I'm a software engineer. I worked at Netscape. I tried both Firefox and Chrome. Why don't you let me know what the problem is? And they got back to me like 12 hours later, I think. No, 15 hours, I think. So yesterday sometime, Tuesday, said, we applied a fix. See if you're still having the same problem. So they didn't tell me what was happening. Anyway, this is not the kind of platform that you can rely on. So the Buy Me an Update program will continue to be published on buymeacoffee.com, but you will now be able to subscribe just like you would any other audio program. The shows will be posted with a slight delay. I don't know if it will be days or hours. Maybe it'll be published later in the day, or it could be published on Friday. I don't know. Same with Coffee Solo. There's an entire feed for that. So those are linked on the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile page. Okay, enough about the links. You don't have to spend any money at these. I've said this many times now. If you're new to the program, I use these platforms for outreach and engagement when they work. Can't guarantee that. Anyway, we'll do some readjustment of the links and so on next week after the dust settles. But all episodes of both programs are now available with RSS feeds and all that stuff. So there you go. Now then, my first layoff. My first job out of college took 2 months for me to find. We graduated in the middle of May. I started in the middle of July. And it was, in the end, a referral chain wherein people from my college, it was Harvey Mudd College, in case you never heard that, were hired a few years prior by this pair of goofballs. And each year after, whether they are at ZD Labs or then later at Supermac, they would say, hey, who do you know from Mudd who's graduating? And so I tried, so I got a call. Hey, do you want me to give you a resume to? And I said, okay. Yeah, we'll see what happens. It was getting to be, it was into the second half of June. And I was like, yeah, I can't be living in the dorm on Scripps campus and copying graduation videotapes for much longer. It's all these things will run out, and so must I. So I got the referral, got a plane ticket up there, which was interesting. That's a rarity at the entry level, it was a surprise. So I took the job, moved up to Silicon Valley. So I headed up to Silicon Valley, which was not even my first choice at the time. I was actually looking in San Diego for jobs. And while things did work out in interesting ways, who can say if that was the best choice? Maybe I should have continued to look in San Diego. Not sure. Anyway, I started working at Supermac in mid-July 1993. I think it was like July 17th or something. They gave me a pager so I could always be reachable, but no increase in pay for that, which is sort of a bad trade, especially nowadays when you never leave work thanks to cell phones and so on. But it was sort of interesting. A lot of stuff unfolded very quickly because right around mid-September, so just over, call it 2 months, 2 months of actually working at the company, I had a one-on-one discussion. Andrew was one of the two goofballs. Hey, can you come in into the conference room here? And I got to talk to you. He informed me that despite their best efforts, I was going to be laid off as part of some cost-cutting attempts to make the company sustainable. I think it was October 1st or so, the actual last day, and I think that was a Friday. I could verify that really quickly. October 1, 1993 was it was a Friday. So yeah, I think it was October 1st was my last day. There was a lunch or something, whatever. We're sorry to see you go. By the way, Supermac would have layoffs and they would go through various tumults and they would get merged or acquired by Radius, their main competitor. And so it was ultimately not a bad thing. So one thing about this being my first layoff, first job, first layoff, it's good to get those out of the way. There was a bonus, my first bonus, not financial, but a little life lesson. I would have been happy to stay at Supermac. It was a fun place to work. It had its problems, but there were enough people who were normal humans with a mix of annoying weirdos. But to make it a fun first job, there are several people there who I was in touch with for many years later. I think I'm still connected to a couple of people from those days. I never hear from them. I never really communicate with them, but there they are in my LinkedIn roles. They'll get pruned away eventually. Why have connections to people who never respond to you? Anyway, that's another life lesson for another time. However, I learned a critical life lesson, to get back on this point, in this transaction, one that lingers to this day. One of my colleagues who had joined Supermac from Apple, a couple of weeks after I did, we were both kind of, let's say he was there for August. I was there for middle of July. He probably joined by the beginning of August, so pretty soon after. So he had joined from Apple and was often seen wearing a tie for some reason, always suspicious seeing that in an engineering area. He would always be, we had like a big lab space and he would come into the lab space with lab benches and so on. He didn't have a desk or, that's not where he worked, but he would come into the lab and we would go, oh, how's the interview going, Dave? Good times. So he reached out to me after the layoffs and asked if he could send my resume to his former colleagues at Apple Quality. This led me to getting a job at Apple in Mariani 1, which I've talked about before. Apple of all places. I was a big Apple fanboy at the time. Now, It was in quality assurance or QA. And at the time, I was really looking at, I wanted to start my engineering career in Silicon Valley. I wanted to do engineering. To me, and, based on what people were saying around me, it's, oh, QA, oh, you're just a tester. That was already kind of ingrained, which is unfortunate. But in 1993, it was still tricky to find entry-level roles. We had just come out of the big Bush recession. We were heading into the Clinton-Gore internet age or something. And I would only much later realize how educational a role in QA would be for anyone at all, doing any sort of product development. Like if you don't know, and I've said this before, someone here in Vegas who is the CTO of a well-known, I guess, highly regarded, but not impressive to me, project consulting company for tech, for software development usually. He said, oh, I thought quality assurance and engineering are usually adversarial. And I said, that's only in unhealthy, dysfunctional companies like yours. It's only much later did I realize how educational a role in QA would be for someone who's designing products for other people, because QA people are the advocate. If you look at it this way, they're the advocates for your customers. They are there to make sure it works, because your customers are going to do that, but they're not going to be so nice about it. So you really got to give your testers, those are the people that are trying to make sure that you don't deliver garbage to your customers, and they don't always get the respect that they deserve. So this worked out, though I did not quite know how well at the time. At the time, I was sick of people saying, oh, so you're just a tester. That's a bad attitude. Those are people who refer to their customers as losers, L-U-S-E-R, loser error, problem between keyboard and chair. They probably don't know what they're doing. And in fact, when I first received a message from the Buy Me a Coffee support thing many, many hours later, I think it was late. I had already moved all the other programs over to the Spotify feed. So I got the generic, did you reboot? Did you do all the things, because instead of asking, can you describe the problem or what you're seeing, or can you give me some idea of what your level of familiarity with, he didn't ask me if I tried looking at the HTTP headers, which I did. And when I didn't see any headers, I knew that their side of the transaction was not responding. So it was just sitting there. He didn't ask those things. So there's always this presumption that the people you're building products or delivering services for don't know anything. And that's the world we live in. There's a glib lesson. The thing I learned in this first experience, though, after only having worked at Supermac for 2 months before I got the notice, it was a good one. It's a glib lesson. It's a life lesson, just like the bonus that I received earlier, the referral thing, and a job that I probably would not have looked for, but I needed to jump in there. The glib lesson is this quote that I came up with. As far as I know, I am the origin of this quotation. It's a quote that I do not throw around lightly, but I have said it to people many times over the decades. The best time to start looking for your next job is on the first day at your new job. In other words, start networking. Talk to people who have worked at this new place for any length of time. Where did they used to work? Who do they know? And so on. Be sure to interact with a lot of people inside and outside the company. Hand out those business cards when you're out and about. By the way, get business cards. Have the company buy you a box of 1,000 or something. If they buy them in bulk, they're $20, $40, whatever. I think I went through about 4,000 business cards at Intel, just because I was going to hackathons and traveling a lot. Always handing out cards. You never know. Always be looking. Now, in a post-pandemic world, which I'll touch on later, that doesn't really matter anymore, but we can start over. Connections I made pre-pandemic don't last or don't persist as well into the post-pandemic era, but now it's a whole new ballgame. You should be known in the hallways and in the email threads. People should just know your name. My colleague Dave there at Supermac, who had passed my resume to Apple, did not have to reach out to me to get me connected at Apple. He didn't have to. So I must have made a good impression at some point. And then the rest is history. Yes, this is glib. Later, when I was working at Salon.com and decided to leave, one of my younger colleagues who had joined out of college, so he joined our little mini engineering group, probably, I joined in September. I think he had just graduated from college, so he was working at at some place on the college campus or whatnot. So he probably joined in October, November or something. Only a short time after I did. So he was pretty new, but still a little young. Not much more experience than I was when I was at Supermac. So one of my younger colleagues had just joined, and he lamented that he considered himself to be more loyal than I was demonstrating when I was packing up my stuff to depart salon.com because it was not a good fit. And it was really a pain to get to, and I was not enjoying my time there. I told him to remember his own words when he was carrying his belongings out in a file box someday. Little did I know, and certainly little did he know, that he would be laid off from Salon with a bunch of other people not long after I departed. It was my glib, it may be glib, my little saying, but loyalty is often, not always, but often a one-way street. Even if it isn't, always be looking on day one. So I was working my way through Silicon Valley. This is true for both of my times. I've covered this in previous episodes. My varied and interesting job history during my 2 passes through Silicon Valley. I would always follow my own advice, and so I would always have something lined up somewhere, or a possibility or 2 at least. I would always be talking to people. I would always have I used to carry my resume when mobile phones became a thing. I would have a copy of my resume on my phone and a link to it, so you could either read it on my phone, or I could email it to you, or I could send you the link. I always had a link to my resume somewhere. This was before LinkedIn became a thing many years later. This was something noteworthy about Silicon Valley in both of these intervals, and maybe today, that the job market was hot. This is not easy to replicate, and it is one reason not to move the family to the quote-unquote next Silicon Valley for that new job. There may not be 10 more for you there if things don't work out. And I've had that conversation with people here in the greater Vegas area. They'd rather, I don't know if this is going to change anytime soon, they'd rather have some things lined up in better known places, because they literally say, if things don't work out here in Vegas, there aren't like 1,000 companies ready to hire. There's 5 maybe in these verticals, right? In technology development and so on. So it's a tricky thing. Silicon Valley was a weird place, and probably still is. Anyway, I tended to jump to the next thing if things were getting weird wherever I was working at the time. And while some might suggest that I was becoming too fickle, maybe too jaded, I will say that I only surprised one employer at Netscape, which was my decision to move on was kind of like, I'm leaving. There wasn't any discussion to have or conversation. And Netscape culture was getting very, very, very weird at the time, and I didn't really care for it. So I moved on. With my decision to move on, I surprised them a little bit, and I do feel sort of bad about that. But then people in my group at Netscape were getting laid off a few months later, so I didn't really feel awful. I would have been laid off, and I wouldn't have had this opportunity. So look out for yourself. The companies do the same. Generally speaking, I tried to have discussions with management and so on before I even gave notice. So they would know. It was like, yeah, I'm thinking about leaving. This is not my notice yet. This is just my thinking out loud, because I didn't really want to surprise people. So after the Netscape thing, and before actually, I'd rather see if there's something to be fixed or updated or changed to make the workplace something that's more reasonable. Not like I needed a custom beanbag chair or anything, but like these things just don't seem healthy or good. And then, give notice and depart. When I left Apple, I had not lined up everything just so. It took a couple of weeks before I started my next gig. And I did tell someone in my group at Apple when they asked if I was taking some time off that I was indeed taking both Saturday and Sunday. This was the usual Silicon Valley way back then. And even though in that particular instance, I did not have something lined up for Monday, so I did have a little bit of time off, I would end up going on to True Vision. I always tried to jump directly if I could. This may or may not have been a great idea, but this too worked out in general. The difference, as I've also mentioned before, finding jobs so easily outside of Silicon Valley was a real eye-opener. I moved to Phoenix in June through August. Like it was moving 2001. That date should live in infamy, or September 11th would anyway. Soon after, cost of living was most definitely a negative in Silicon Valley, but when it came to finding new gigs, finding potential co-founders for a startup idea, or trying trying out a novel idea in general. There was a lot of upside there in Silicon Valley. It's the place where innovation culture is firmly rooted, to be sure. Despite all the various problems and again that cost of living, it does have something in the water, I guess. I think this was declining though over time and maybe monotonically over the years that I was there both times. But it was fun while it lasted. I think now there's way too much. The jig is up, as they say, right? There's no longer much mystery or magic. It's a crank that people turn. There's a lot of funding. There's a lot of money floating around. There's a lot of presumptions made and so on. So I don't think we're going to see quite the same thing again. Too much politics and so on. Anyway, when I did return to Silicon Valley for that second tour, 2005, I had gotten that gig at salon.com I mentioned, and while it was an educational experience, to be sure, it was my only .com that I ever worked at in my entire career. It was absolutely the wrong place for me at the time, or probably in general, for me to be working. They did have layoffs, but I put in my notice and I wrote a note to the management that a news website should not be employing engineers. They should be outsourcing their technical needs and their entire platform and focus on the content. And I don't know if they heard me. I think that eventually they would switch to a WordPress website, but that was much later. So who knows? Who knows what's going on over there? The thing that prompted this topic today was yet another burst in the Intel layoff postings on LinkedIn as they go through yet more downsizing. I don't know if they always return to 100,000 people or so worldwide, but I don't know if they're going to make it this time. This is a company with the rule of 75, where your retirement age plus years at Intel equals 75, or maybe not. I've heard stories, especially back in the old days, that they would have like a guidance counselor that would map out your career with Intel, what you want to accomplish. It was a very old school company. More power to them, although they're not going to survive much longer. The long-term folks are getting shown the door right now like anyone else. Once again, that loyalty road. There's some news for you in case you're wondering. Intel in Oregon is not Intel in Silicon Valley. The only other major employer in Hillsboro, Oregon, in the tech sector is Nike, sneakers. They do have tech, right? So maybe you'll start seeing some entrepreneurial adventures springing up there in the Hillsboro area. There's certainly a lot of talent, but it's not Silicon Valley. It's not a Silicon Valley job market, nor was Phoenix before I moved back to Silicon Valley, though that was post 9/11, but also pre-remote work being a real thing. So it'll be interesting times ahead, not only because Intel is dumping a lot of employees again, and a lot of them will, just like they have in the previous recent layoffs, have to face the fact that Hillsboro, Oregon is an Intel town and there's not a tremendous... This has changed since these layoffs. Some other companies have sprang up. So it'll be interesting to see if they'll hire their fellow colleagues and the alum from Intel and whatnot. But in general, other companies are also laying off employees in droves. So it'll be interesting times. So speaking of Intel, Intel Corporation was the other company from which I was laid off. This was a long time ago, like a decade ago at this point. Sometimes I think, oh my God, how long has it been? Too long. It was a time window when they had determined that they had too many of their employees too far from their fab hubs. If I was living in the Hillsboro area in Oregon, in Silicon Valley, or in Chandler, Arizona, I was fine. That's where they have the fabs. But the one Intel employee in Nevada would have to move to one of those three places or take a layoff. I could have moved, but the group I was in was basically end of life soon after they got out of the Maker Innovator group and so on. So I would have been looking around internally like, oh, now I got to find a job now that I moved back to Silicon Valley or moved to Oregon, which I had no connection to. So I probably would have had to move back to Silicon Valley. And then I would have been trying to find a job to stay afloat there and so on. And it may or may not have been easy because I have found when I returned to Silicon Valley the second time, it was not so easy to reconnect or to establish networks and stuff. So I kind of wonder. Like I said, I think the good times have been declining, or the time. Anyway, I don't know. There have been RIF layoffs since, so the possibility of getting laid off anyway would have been a reality. And now they're having one now, and now the CEO has actually said they kind of missed the AI hardware boat. So this is a boat that's sinking, and the boat doesn't even know it, or now it does. It's been sinking the whole time. So it'll be interesting times ahead for Intel, but ultimately, I would have only been in a different and more expensive world of hurt if I had moved to any of the. Well, I know Intel Chandler was not a good place. I worked there as a contractor. I would never return to that location. So I would have had to go to Oregon or California. And just because of the job market in Silicon Valley, I would have gone to California and I would have been laid off anyway. So it's a curse. It's a doom that I had to deal with. And here we are. So yeah, today I am seeing yet more layoffs from my existing Intel connections on LinkedIn. Either they themselves, or they're reacting to or commenting on announcements posted by their colleagues whom I may or may not know. The entire job market in tech is going through something right now. Something that will probably be painful for everyone. Remember that the loyalty street is one way at these big companies, especially. If AI pretends it can do your job, your employer might be counting the savings while you're packing your things up to leave. This may be the time when the various creative people who have been working at these big companies can stretch a bit, do things that they've always wanted to do without the resources and oversight of their big name employer. Finally, I don't have all the chaos at Intel. I can sit in my garage or my basement or my wherever, get my friends together, and we'll start a new company. That's possible. So who knows? This is a double-edged sword, but mass layoffs mean colleagues can join forces on the outside. So the people I know who are getting laid off will probably be fine eventually. A lot of talented people, but then they'll be in a pool of tens of thousands of really talented people. So and we now live in the. If you know any photographers, the photographer will be asked this question. Can you do a photography job? Can you take photos of this thing, this project, this person, this house, whatever it is? Can you take pictures and don't charge me and I will post them so you will get more exposure? They literally use that word, so it makes it funny. So I have photographer friends who have recounted these and you're like, I get exposure all the time. So no, but the other problem with photography is now everybody has a really high quality computed photography camera in their pocket. So they think, oh, I don't need to call a photographer. I can just take a picture with my iPhone or my Android device. And only when you interact with a photographer and you see what they do and how they do it and the equipment they use to accomplish the things that they accomplish, then you say, oh, that looks better than the picture I took. And they say, yeah. So I think we're going to see this with AI. We're going to see AI that, oh, look, it can do the same work as a photographer, but it's taking just fine pictures with the camera we have in our pocket, if I can mix metaphors. Eventually, they're going to say, oh, yeah, this isn't as good. So AI pretends it can do your job, but can it? This may be the time when the various creative people who have been working at these big, giant companies can stretch a bit, like I said, but they also may link up, join forces, and they may say, you know what, we don't need to work for big companies. We're going to do more interesting things. Honestly, I think we're going to go through a COBOL crisis of sorts. They stopped teaching. COBOL is a programming language that I think was developed in 1954, comes to mind. It's used on really big computers, IBM mainframes and so on. You can run it on your computer at home though, today. And a lot of really large, high capacity, high reliability accounting systems, the IRS, Social Security, unemployment systems, state governments, institutions, payrolls. They use COBOL to run these, paycheck runs, benefit runs, audits, system audits, bookkeeping at scale, right? Millions and millions, hundreds of millions of records, of accounts with however many records per and so on. So it gets crazy. So they stopped teaching it, but there's all these systems that use it. So now if there's a COBOL crisis, you go, okay, does anybody know COBOL? No? So as I always say, when you start having AI do the work of junior engineers and you let the senior engineers review the work of the AI, when the AI leaves, there will be no more junior engineers, so there will be no more senior engineers. Where are the senior engineers going to come from if there are no junior engineers? So AI, I just read an article today. AI is really good at doing the middle part, but their AI is really bad at finishing programming projects, for example. So it'll be, I think the world will be in for a little lesson as they hand more and more over to AI. Like, oh, somebody invented the automatic transmission at some point and said, okay, no more shifting gears ever again. And then I'm going to guess that shortly thereafter they said, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't really work that well yet. But we'll find out. So we're going through what I think will be a COBOL crisis. I think AI will disappoint in many areas, either forcing some rehires, and already there have been some anecdotes along these lines, nothing earth-shattering yet. I mean, Meta and Microsoft and Google might start rehiring. Oh, guess what? We're going to need those same jobs to be filled again. Or this will elevate the human-powered innovation that is led by people who are succeeded at these big companies by AI ahead of their downturn. So Google and Meta and all these may pour billions of dollars into training AI to do the job of humans, and they may think, oh, we're going to save all this money, and they might die in the process. That's what I'm thinking. So when you lay off people, you really, in the long run, the opportunity belongs to the people that get laid off. And certainly my first layoff was a good thing. My layoff from Intel, I sometimes wonder if I should have tried to hang on a little bit longer. I don't think I would have been able to. I think they were really, really bent on getting people out unless I was much more well-connected higher up in the chain. I know a couple of people who ended up being able to stay in their working from their home office. But the take home is, I think, layoffs will ultimately serve the people who are being laid off. And I think ultimately, again, like after that, the innovation wave will hopefully kind of resurface. It will be interesting to see if the humanity at large recognizes the value of small company innovation, of individual contributor innovation. Everybody is so quick to assume that, oh, Meta, Google, the FANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and now it's Meta and Alphabet. So it's manga, right? Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix. Oh, it's not Google, so it's Mana, Netflix, Alphabet. Yeah, it would be nice if we could return to small companies doing cool things, but not the likes of buy me a coffee. That sort of customer experience is not going to work. So hopefully there will be more talented people entering the innovation space and doing some cool stuff. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm one of those. I don't know if anybody's listening to that. Don't forget, I have been doing this for a long time and I know a lot of stuff that is so easily forgotten. And just type it in ChatGPT and I'll find out. So, interesting times ahead, but I think I did learn a lot. I don't trust big companies, and yeah, neither should you. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.